Now, something I constantly preach and I constantly get, a lot of positive feedback on. In fact, I get feedback from hunters that it's changed the way they hunt for the rest of their lives, and it's improved their success rate, several times over what it's always been for their life. But at the same time, there's that thought that, go both ways with this, but the thought that more time in the woods equals more deer opportunities. And to me, that might be true if you have a random property, you're just looking at random movement. Public land, for example, there's some incredible rut funnel stands I can think of. You just have to put the time in that stand and you're going to do well. But when you're hunting small parcels of private land and even a lot of public land areas, more does not equal more when it comes to time and stand. In fact, years ago, I wrote an article, you can shoot more bucks by sitting on the couch. The old saying is you can't shoot deer by sitting on the couch. Well, yes, you can, because you're not putting an over amount of pressure on your land. You're not pressuring the deer herd. You're saving stands for the best times, the best weather days. And I truly believe there's weather days during the rut, during the October lull, during the early season, that you can go in and you have a high degree of likelihood that mature bucks are moving because of that cold front drop. And yeah, I hunt right after the drop, and you have a high degree of likelihood that those deer are going to be on the move. And I'll go into stands, it could be a pre-rut, rut stand, and I believe that I have a 50% chance of shooting the actual target buck I am going after, because I've waited and been patient for the perfect weather day. And if I had hunted 3 bad days the week before in that same stand, it'd be a ghost town by then. There's a lot of people right now, they're hunting in the early season. And let's say you're hunting a week somewhere right now, and by the 5th, 6th, 7th day, you're not seeing any deer. And a lot of it is because I was talking to Dylan this morning, and they've been checking out their trail cameras out of state, and they're noticing when the deer get turned velvet that they disappear, and that happens a lot. But I don't think it's any coincidence. A lot of times that comes under the same time when hunters are hitting the woods. And so pressure starts being applied, and all of a sudden these bucks turn nocturnal. That October lull is another video that we're shooting today. Bottom line is, first time in the stand is the best time to shoot a mature buck. Each time thereafter, then the percentage of opportunity goes down. I've seen that over and over again. Now, there are stands you can spread out. You can hunt every 1 or 2 weeks. I'm not saying that you don't hunt these stands more than 1 time a year or more than 2 or 3. The average stands I have, I hunt them 3 or 4 times. I hunt quite a few that 1 or 2 times, and I hunt a few not at all. I'm going to go around this room right here with these bucks, and I'm just going to show and illustrate. Now, 9 out of 14 of these bucks are bow bucks. The biggest bucks are bow bucks. There's one gun buck that's in there that's pretty big too. But all these bucks were shot, at a certain number of times hitting the stand, and I'm going to talk about each one as we go around the room, just to try to illustrate the importance of those early sits and how they can affect your hunting. And patience is a key when it comes to consistently shooting mature bucks. Of course, you can shoot a giant buck, the best buck in the woods, on the worst weather day, heavily pressured area, middle of October. But folks don't rely on that tactic, because if you're looking into consistent mature buck and target buck hunting and success, then you're going to need to follow this type of principle when you go in the woods. And low pressure is always better. Fewer sits at the perfect time are always better. And I will forget some of these bucks, but this buck was shot the 3rd day of gun season, and I shot him the very first time using that stand for a morning sit. So that was a first sit stand. This buck is a public land Michigan buck, a buck I was going after by sign. And so scouted just before the gun season opener, and a lot of big buck sign back in a swamp area that I hunt on public land that's way away from other people. Knew there was a big buck in there. My stepson Dante sat with me along with Jake on opening day, and Dante believes he saw this deer about 1 o'clock in the afternoon. And the weather wasn't right the 2nd day of gun season, so I didn't hunt. And then the 3rd day of gun season, it was perfect to go in for a morning hunt. Diane actually really urged me to go out and hunt that morning. I actually didn't want to get out of bed. It was just wore out, and from the long hunting season before, I put a lot more effort into bow hunting than gun hunting. But this was a 45-minute walk back in the swamps. Sure enough, went out there and shot him about 10 in the morning, and that was the buck in the area. And but it was the second time using that blind and hunting in that area ever, even ever walking in. This buck right here was, he was a non-core buck, meaning that he lived on someone else's land for the season. We'd get a few pictures of him here and there. We had 2 or 3 pictures a year before and 2 or 3 pictures a year before that, where he was on the parcel we hunted, but he'd have to go around a large cow pasture through a funnel to get there. And so, you know, of course, didn't see him in October, didn't get any pictures of him during the summer, but we watched him about 3/4 of a mile to a mile away on the hay fields and bean fields every night during the summer, to the point where Jake said, I'm going to shoot that buck. That buck was his. Well, Jake wasn't around, and it was about the end of October, and I knew there'd be a chance of this buck in that particular funnel. Set up the stand for him. Had to be an evening hunt because I couldn't get in there during the morning without spooking deer. And there's a bedding area right below this, about 200 yards. And sure enough, about an hour before dark, he came up to hit a scrape. And that was the first time using that stand. And my hunting buddy Rich sat there a few days later and shot the buck of his lifetime at that time too. That was the biggest buck he'd ever shot. So 2 sits, 2 bucks. And last year, there's no bucks on the wall, but last year, both Rich and I, first time for the year, he sat in the one stand 2 times, shot his 2 bucks. I sat in the other stand 2 times, first 2 times ever, and shot my 2 bucks, both during the primary rut and then secondary rut. So those aren't on the wall, but that was another example last year. Go around this buck. This was a gun season buck, maybe 2005 in Wisconsin, and one that I saw the year before. I actually got my broadhead back out of him from the year before because I shot a high shoulder shot. And obviously a year later, he's still kicking and doing really well. And I shot him first time using the stand, opening day, back on a point in a bedding area. Another real nice first sit buck. This buck right here, this was one we watched for 3 years. Actually field dressed 217 pounds, and he lived on the neighbors to the east. We saw him during the summertime there feeding, and we'd just get a couple pictures of him. Again, a buck that I call a non-core buck. And Jake and I set up for him with a pop-up in some rocks in an area we never hunted, facing to the east, coming in way around the long way, waiting for him to come back to us in the morning, hopefully getting kicked off the neighbor's land to the east. I know they hunt heavily, a lot of people. And it was really crazy because Jake and I saw this buck, or at least I did. Let's say it was 10 o'clock, and he was feeding around the hollow towards us. We had a pile of does. Neighbors came in with the ATV around the corner about 500 yards, kicked all the deer off their land, and then they were settling down, feeding in front of us. Some small bucks, bunch of does and fawns, let's say 15 deer. And then this guy's coming around the whole time. Well, I could have had some shots with him with the rifle. I didn't realize it was this buck, the one we were after. As he started to get closer, obviously I realized, and then it was to that point where maybe Jake can get a shot. Jake is sitting on my right with the gun like this. The deer got here. A doe had kept feeding uphill behind us, started blowing, and all the deer ran, including the buck. I grabbed the rifle, neck was sticking out behind the rock, turned this way, and shot him and dropped him. And it was moments of tears for both Jake and I, and some hugs. I even have some pictures with Jake with a buck and both of us together too, but it was an awesome father-son moment. And of course, a memory lasts a lifetime, but another first sit buck. This one right here, I believe this was 2011 actually. And it was a water hole. We put that water hole out in May. He was a ghost buck, non-core buck. There were 2 bucks fighting out in the field. It was a cold front, October 20th. And all these bull bucks are cold front bucks. This one was October 22nd, I believe, in 2011, or 20th, right around there, if you looked at Weather Underground. But he was coming through, exiting stage left. He was getting out of there. 2 dominant bucks out in the field fighting. And he was old, you know, older buck, 5-year-old. But, and we had pictures of him for 3 years, but he always disappeared during the season. We knew where he was at because we saw him during gun season driving around at night. And, but he was exiting, shot him with the bow, and that was the second sit in that stand that year. So a lot of these stands we look at, I can't wait to hunt this stand, but I'm hunting them in the perfect time, and I'm waiting for a certain buck to get there, whether the trail cam's telling me, the sign that's popping up, like in the case of the big public land buck over there. When the sign's there, when the pictures are there, And the pictures I don't even need from that year, like the 13 point over here with the drop tine, this one right here. We had no pictures of him that year, but I knew he was live from scouting, summer scouting, and some late season pictures from the year before where he came randomly through. And so just need to know he's alive. And then once you see the sign pop up, big buck sign, big trees, wrapped around rubs, up on top right up here, real aggressive scraping, early scraping, then you know he's around, it's time to go in. And so that's when I go in. I don't go in before. A lot of these non-core bucks, if I over hunted the stand like where that 13 point is, if I stuck that in and hunted all October, well, the amount of pellet count, urine scent, rub scrapes in that area would be drastically decreased. And I don't think it's a real welcome mat for him to come in when there's not a lot of deer around. He doesn't have that scent around of other deer. And then he just doesn't come in the area. So a lot of those opportunities are missed before they even take place. This was a bow buck right here. Shot him the 9th day of gun season. And that stand in particular is one of our favorite stands. But think about it, 9th day of gun season, shot him with a bow. He was a non-core buck. I was really hoping to see him that night. He came in from the direction he should. He came in right to my lap. I hadn't hunted that stand for probably since mid-October. I'd probably hunted it 3 times that year. This was probably the 3rd time or 4th sit. Spaced out from September, a couple times in October, and then I didn't hunt that stand until the last day of gun season, Wisconsin's gun season, which would have been the end of November, with my bow, and he came right into my lap. This one right here, that was, I believe, 2003, big giant old buck. I don't know if he's 7, 8 years old, but he's old. Really nice one, huge. We never weighed him, but he's got the neck and frame of all these other big ones right around here that were over 200 or around 200, 190 to whatever. But he was with another doe fighting, or with another buck fighting for a doe in the morning. Watched him for a while, actually tried sneaking up on him, got to within 30 yards, didn't realize he was down in the bank. He took off. They went out through a certain funnel, the same funnel that 13 point was shot, about a half mile away. And I set up for him that night with a climber, and we didn't have any stands in that area. I rarely hunt with a climber on private land, but this is a bench where no deer bed, but they all funnel through. And he came through with that doe. And I'm going to admit something about that too. You know, it sounds like all these are perfect and most of them went off unhitched, but I set up for this buck to come through that funnel that evening and with that doe, and sure enough he did, but he actually came through the opposite direction from what I was expecting. So, you know, all these don't come through perfectly at times, but it was the right weather, right day, right funnel, and it was another first time sitting in that stand to shoot that buck. This buck right here, we call the turntine buck. This was 2005. And that buck, my hunting buddy Carl, comes here from Georgia. He would hunt 9 days at a time. So like a Friday through a Sunday. Well, I never like to hunt a week. I feel like I'm wasting half that time, you know, for sits because it's bad weather days. So I hunted the weekend with Carl. We're sitting there on a Monday and it's 70 degrees, 75, it's noon, and we're just kind of sitting out there chatting, and you know, like I'm going home. I have work to do. I was a real estate appraiser then, and I need to get home, do my work, and come back. And sure enough, I did. We had a big cold front on Wednesday into Thursday that week. I came back Wednesday, got in late, went out and sat in that stand one time. It was our horse pasture stand. We'd never sat in it before, and killed this buck with that sit about 10 in the morning. And you can imagine Carl ran all the way down the hill. We were both extremely excited, and Carl had missed him like a half hour before. This buck cruised up around, came back down, and we had our little two-way radios. I let him know we always check in on the hour, and he came running down the hill, fell, broke his quiver. I actually didn't even walk up to the buck until Carl got there, had some big hugs and congratulatory hugs, and went down and sat by the deer and just stared at him. And pretty awesome first buck. And then that started a tradition with that horse pasture stand, and that we ended up shooting probably, I shot, I think, 2 more bucks. Carl shot like 8 bucks out of that same stand. Max shot a couple bucks out of that same stand. So it was a hot stand for a great number of years after that. And we waited till the best time you can imagine. This buck right here. This buck right here was actually the buck that this buck was pushing sideways through the brush and keeping away from that doe. This buck was doing that to this buck the year before. And so I shot this one 2004, that one 2003. This was a basic 10 the year before. A 3.5-year-old. I think this was a 4-year-old buck. I don't think he was 5. And I went in the morning. This is a very aggressive buck. The night before, I'd snort wheezed at a couple other bucks that were snort wheezing and fighting out in the field. He came in snort wheezing from the opposite direction, kept rattling the fence, making rubs. The trees were against the fence. The whole fence would shake. He came in, made scrapes. By the time he got in, it was too late. Well, he was a very aggressive buck. The next morning, going in to a morning stand, first sit opportunity. In 2005, he actually charged me. I turned my light on in the morning, and he turned back at like 10 feet, and I ended up shooting him like 3 hours later with a bunch of does just 60 yards from there in a stand that we had 2 stands on the 2-acre field, and that was one of them. And that was the first sit buck. I had a heck of a time. He ended up field dressing 193. I had to pull him uphill to get him to the truck, and I was by myself. And even getting him into the truck, I remember when I finally got him in the truck, it felt really good at that point, but it was a lot of work getting him out. But another first-time morning sit bucks. And if you see a pattern, there's a lot of first-time morning bucks, stand sits. And like last year, the 4 that Rich and I had in 2 sits each out of 1 stand, 2 different stands, 1 stand each. They were all, first and second sits. We shot those bucks, so in the morning. Again, this one right here, this was a Ohio public land target buck that we were after. Actually, we'd sat in this stand 2 or 3 times during the season, let's say October, November. This was the Monday before Thanksgiving, 40-degree temperature drop. I drove down just to hunt this buck and a couple other ones for 2 mornings and 1 evening, then get back for Thanksgiving. It was a 600-mile drive down there, or 700, whatever it was. And he came in that stand. It was, I believe, the 3rd time sitting in that stand, maybe the 4th. But shot him on that hunt about an hour and a half into the first morning after that cold front. After driving down 11 hours, sleeping in the car for 40 minutes, it was worth it, because this pattern works all the way around. It's worked so many times that I feel like I go into a stand that's been saved, that hasn't been overpressured, with the right weather, and you're talking a 50% sit for the target buck you're after. I've been doing this since the early 90s. I have bucks around the corner in the utility room, head mounts. I have over at the Stockyard, too, a restaurant in town here, and they're all that same theme. Most of them, they just follow the same theme. Doesn't matter if these are the bigger ones or older ones. But this buck right here, first time sit. It's a real nice 10-point I was after, and I think it was 2014. And I had a mock scrape that I had created, and it was on one of the lands here. I hunt still, and I went in there. It was I hunted with my dad, my boys on opening day. So the 4th day was my time to hunt, and I went out and went over, tucked under a red cedar so I could see back into where that mock scrape was, out in the corner of a food plot, about 125 yards away, somewhere around there, 150. And he came right to me. I actually have a picture on our trail camera of him taking a nosedive after I shot him. You can see my little orange dot in the background of me where I was shooting him, right in front of that mock scrape. Another first sit time for this buck. And, again, the same theme. This buck right here, it was the 3rd night of gun season, and we wanted to mix it up, try something new. We hadn't hunted out of a certain stand we called the Pine Tree Stand, and went out, and again, first time sit, Pine Tree Stand, evening stand. He was coming out through the CRP, looking for does, possibly going to a food plot, but I didn't let him get there. So first time sit. Now this buck right here, this is a real special buck. I wrote an article about this. It was a chapter in my book called The Morning Sneak. And this is a buck that I saw the year before, it was the last day of bow season. And I hunted, he came below me, and I couldn't shoot straight below me. I could shoot out to 40 yards in all these different legs, but he was right below me. And I believe he's a 5-year-old. He looked really heavy and massive as a 4-year-old too, and I just couldn't shoot. There's no openings. He was down below me for about 5 minutes. It was cold, but I was shaking because I was nervous. And I believe it was 2005 or 2006 when that happened, right around there. And so 2006, I believe. But he just sat down there. And I believe he finally looked up because my leg was shaking so bad. And I kept shaking, looking down, and I was trying to control my nerves. And even at that point, I'd shot quite a few big bucks. And but I still get nervous, and I still do that to this day if you give me enough time, especially something like that where he's so close and you're just sitting there watching him. I grunted him in. He was out with a bunch of does and fawns. He was the last buck in the field. There were 7 other bucks, 14, 15 does and fawns. It was one of the greatest nights I've ever had, most deer I've ever sat and watched. And then he came out last, was sparring with a couple other bucks. I grunted. He came over 80 yards right to me, and I just couldn't get the shot because he was too close. And so the next year, we sat a stand. I did in May. I hung this stand. It was a ugly old oak tree. It was twisted, and it was on a bench about halfway down. And you can always count on shooting deer on a hillside if you're above them in the morning. And that's what I did. I went the long way in. I actually walked through a nest of ticks. So in the morning, I felt something crawling on me and turned the light on. I had about 30, 40 ticks on me. Just kept picking them off till daylight. Well, cool thing is at daylight, we were getting a picture of him up in front of the water hole before daylight when I would have been walking in if I took the easy road in to that morning stand. Instead, I took the hard way in, another first sit buck, hoping to shoot this buck, and another first sit morning bow hunt. So I hope you see a theme with all of these bucks. And I could go through more. There's a pile of them on the floor right next to Dylan. All these right here. This is a first sit buck right here. So first sit buck, first sit buck, first sit buck. And those were all gun, bow Michigan, and bow Wisconsin. So, you know, and if I extend that to the bucks I have around in the utility room that didn't fit on the wall, the ones over at the stockyard, it's the same theme. You know, everyone says the first sit is the most important sit. And going along with that, the fewer sits that you have in a stand, the better and more productive you can be. There's always a perfect time for every stand in the woods to hunt. And if there's not, get rid of the stand. But it is so important to make sure that you're saving those stands for the best time. And this is coming from someone that didn't have a lot of time. I was a real estate appraiser through 2010 full-time for 11 years, and I had up to 70 appraisals in 1 month, 700 in 1 year. And so I was very, very busy to the point where when the whitetail business started in 2005 and it started to pick up, I really was managing 2 full-time jobs where I'd go home at 5, 6, have dinner with the family, kids would go to bed, and I'd come back into work till 1 o'clock. And so it was more than I could handle at that time, even work-wise. So when I left to go hunting, I wasn't looking at a weekend or long weekends. In fact, I have a hunting partner that would get mad at me because he wanted to go on the weekend when he had his long weekends and could take more time off. And I wanted to hit that cold front that went through on Wednesday, hunt it Thursday morning, Thursday night, Friday morning, and go home. So I'd trade a day and a half hunting during the week. I came down here 7 hours for one evening sit in a first sit stand to try for a 10-point, and it ended up the neighbor came through trespassing with his UTV, and kids had no clue that hunting season was even in. And he's one of my closer friends in the area to this day, because I did go to have a chat with him. But so that first sit is so critical that I've even driven that 7 hours one way just for one sit for a certain target buck in a certain first sit stand, because over the years, going back to 93 when I shot a really nice webbed framed buck that I was after, that was a first sit morning sit for that buck, my true target buck, all these target bucks. And it really does work to be very patient. Less is more when it comes to shooting your target bucks and the best bucks in the neighborhood. If you want to shoot average bucks, or if you just want to shoot does, go out and hunt whatever. Don't even worry about this stuff. But if you can teach yourself and really master the art of patience when it comes to shooting target bucks and the best bucks in the neighborhood, and knowing that there is a true best time to sit in a stand. And of course, it's not 100%. You still have to eat a tag here and there, but I look at it over a 10-year period, you'll shoot 80% of your target bucks, which is a very unfair advantage compared to everyone else in the neighborhood. First time into a stand, being patient with a sit, watch the weather, go in with a surgical strike precision on that mature buck. And what I found over the years is there are a lot more 50% sits than you can ever imagine going in on a certain buck, whether it's a non-core buck or core buck, wherever it's living, you're going in for that buck because you already know he's alive. He's going to be in that location because of your scouting efforts, and you have a stand waiting because you haven't burned it out ahead of time the week before, the month before, you come in there, it's like a needle in a haystack, he's right at your feet, you shoot him, and that's how you consistently shoot your target mature bucks over the years, and these are a lot of great examples of that. Try it this season, try it for the future years to come, and I think it's something and a tactic that can change how you hunt for the rest of your life.